Ghostbusters is not only one of the all-time great comedies, but it also pioneered the genre of the special effects-driven comedy, paving the way for future films like Men in Black and Galaxy Quest. However, the original version of the film was considerably darker and more fantastical, featuring multiple dimensions and rival teams of Ghostbusters. Not only that, but the cast would have been completely different too. So let's dive in and find out why the film and the cast were changed and what could have been Ghostbusters. Before we dive into the video, don't forget to please like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content. When Lorne Michaels co-created Saturday Night Live, he wanted to redefine comedy the way the Beatles had redefined what it meant to be pop stars, and he succeeded, as SNL not only became a cultural phenomenon, but it launched its cast members to levels of fame usually reserved for rock stars, helping many of them easily make the leap from TV to movies. After John Belushi starred in Animal House, he joined forces with his close friend and fellow SNL alum Dan Aykroyd to adapt their SNL characters the Blues Brothers for the big screen. A year after the film came out, Aykroyd read an article about trapping ghosts, inspiring him to come up with the idea for a second film starring him and Belushi as Ghostbusters, which he'd model on the old comedy teen films from the 1940s that saw virtually every comedy duo like Abbott and Costello do a ghost movie. Meanwhile, Lorne Michaels and the remaining members of the original SNL cast would leave by 1980, casting uncertainty over the show's future. However, it would be saved by a then unknown comedian named Eddie Murphy, who not only sustained the show during Michaels' absence, preventing its cancellation, but also emerged as a huge star, leading Aykroyd to pencil him in as the third Ghostbuster in the script he was writing that he titled Ghost Smashers. The film would have opened with a prologue explaining that electric and magnetic field waves ripped the fabric of our dimension and tore a hole in our reality envelope, resulting in spirits and entities from the other side entering our reality through these holes. To combat these ghosts, a new profession called ghostbusting was created. From here, the film would have cut to the garage door opening at the fire hall, as Ecto-1 roars out into the night as the guys, who are already seasoned ghost hunters working for an established business, respond to a bust. The year is also 2012, with many different ghostbusting teams and businesses competing with each other for the same clients. Ecto-1 also would have been black, with white and purple emergency lights that would have given it an ethereal purple glow as it races down the street. Plus, it would have been equipped with an advanced dematerializing capability that allowed it to elude police pursuit, as Ghostbusters in this version functions somewhat outside the law. In a deleted scene from the film, the Ectomobile lights a parking ticket on fire, which is the only leftover from Aykroyd's original script that suggested the vehicle had some sort of paranormal powers. The Ghostbusters arrive at the Greenville guest house after the owner discovered a gluttonous ghost, or in Ghostbusters lingo, a FRVP, free repeating vaporous phantasm. Basically, it's Slimer, described here as onion-headed, and after chasing it through the guest home, the Ghostbusters immobilize it with particle beams and trap it before writing the owner a bill for $500, which he balks at. After capturing the ghost, they place him in their spectral storage facility, which is not in the basement of the firehouse, but in a deserted gas station in northern New Jersey, which the Ghostbusters have converted into a holding cell for ghosts. The Ghostbusters' gear in this is different too. Not only do they all wear helmets, but they use wands instead of particle guns that are strapped in place with one on each wrist and extended out along the palm like a retractable antenna. And while they'd eventually be replaced by the proton gun, the wands were also attached by a cord to a back-mounted proton power source. The cause of New York's surge in paranormal activity is the result of Zool, a terror dog having strayed out of its dimension, only to be caught and held captive by the Ghostbusters' employer, an interdimensional being named Shandor, who the Ghostbusters don't realize isn't human. Unfortunately, the Zool was the favorite pet of Gozer, ruler of the sixth dimension, who is now stopping at nothing to find and recover him. When the ghosts are eventually accidentally released from the Ghostbusters gas station storage facility, a 25-acre sinkhole opens up, disrupting a long and active fault line which turns New Jersey into a blazing inferno. This is where the final battle between Gozer and the Ghostbusters takes place, but not before the Ghostbusters are whisked away into other dimensions. When they finally are able to return to New Jersey, Gozer doesn't take the form of Mr. Stay Puft, but instead takes the form of a gigantic, horrifying monster. However, Mr. Stay Puft still would have been in the movie, appearing briefly much earlier in the film as one of the many large-scale Gozer manifestations, along with Ray's pet lizard. While literally writing a line in the script for Belushi, Aykroyd got a devastating phone call informing him that Belushi had died of a drug overdose. To replace him, Aykroyd would turn to another former SNL castmate, Bill Murray, who would agree to do the project after reading half of Aykroyd's first draft, although Murray famously would never officially commit to a project until the 11th hour, with everyone on Ghostbusters unsure if he'd even show up to the first day of shooting. However, the final film would at least contain an homage to Belushi in the form of Slimer. To direct the film, Aykroyd would turn to Ivan Reitman, who had just directed Stripes, starring future Ghostbusters Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. Ramis. However, after reading the script, Reitman felt it was far too ambitious, especially for the 80s, and would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Not only that, but he complained that it was all action, with the guys just catching ghosts page after page with very little character work and not many laughs. Still, he thought there were some great ideas in there, and since it was the 80s and everyone was going into business, he suggested making the characters paranormal investigators doing a postgraduate study program, who after getting kicked out of university set up their own business. Reitman also wanted to nix the fantasy elements and ground the film in a modern American city, feeling that New York's Gothic architecture was the perfect backdrop. And last but not least, Reitman wanted to bring in Harold Ramis to help rewrite the script, after Ramis had worked with him on Animal House, Meatballs, and Stripes. He also wanted to cast him as the third Ghostbuster. And because Aykroyd's original script didn't differentiate the characters all that much, they quickly came up with the archetypes for each, inspired by the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. Aykroyd's Ray Stantz would be the heart of the Ghostbusters, Ramis's Egon Spengler would be the brains, and Murray's Peter Venkman would be the mouth. The character of Winston Zeddemore was created to be a stand-in for the audience, and as a new member of the team was a character who could have things explained to him, which would thus in turn be explained to the audience. In fact, this type of character appears often in movies that require a lot of exposition. For example, Elliot Page's character in Inception serves the same purpose. Ernie Hudson was cast because Reitman liked that he had a likable, kind of naive quality to him, perfect for a new recruit to the team. And while many fans assume that this part was written for Eddie Murphy, that's simply not true. Murphy was originally eyed to play the part that eventually evolved into Egon. In an earlier version of the script, however, Winston would have had a much larger role, with an elaborate backstory as an Air Force demolitions expert. According to Ernie Hudson, the night before shooting began, he received a new script that greatly reduced his role in order to expand Bill Murray's part at the request of the studio. Louis Tully, played by Rick Moranis, was originally written and conceived for John Candy, who Reitman had directed in Stripes. However, to Reitman's surprise, after reading the script, Candy wasn't enthusiastic about appearing in the movie, and wanted to give the character a German accent and a pair of German shepherds as pets. Even though Reitman really wanted Candy for the role, he'd balk at these suggestions, telling Candy that there were already dogs in the movie, and by adding more, it'll get complicated and confusing. After passing on Candy, Reitman realized that the character of Louis Tully as written was very similar to a role Candy played on SCTV named Johnny LaRue, as well as the character Candy had just played in Splash, leading Reitman to assume that Candy didn't want to keep playing the same character and made those suggestions to try and play someone new. To replace him, Reitman would turn to another SCTV alum, Rick Moranis. After reading the script, Moranis immediately called Reitman back and said, "Thank God Candy hates it. He's an idiot. This is the greatest script I've ever read." From here, Moranis would help develop the character, turn him into an accountant, and ad-lib that long speech as he welcomed the couple into the party. In fact, losing the freedom Moranis had to ad-lib and help develop the characters he was playing on these earlier films played a significant role in his disillusionment with Hollywood, ultimately leading to his departure from the industry following his wife's death. In respect to Gozer, Aykroyd originally envisioned the God of Destruction as a nondescript, kindly-looking man in a business suit and offered the part to Paul Rubens, aka Pee Wee Herman. After he'd pass on the role, director Ivan Reitman would take the opportunity to re-envision the part, opting instead for a contemporary, new-wave, androgynous-looking female. To play Dana Barrett, Reitman auditioned Sigourney Weaver, hot off dramatic roles in Alien and The Year of Living Dangerously, which made Reitman skeptical that she could do comedy. To prove him wrong, Weaver got on the coffee table on all fours and began growling and barking like one of the terror dogs in the script. She also suggested that her character should be possessed by one of the dogs on the roof during the finale, and that her character should be a musician, not a model, as was written in the script, feeling her character should be kind of uptight and a bit strict, but also have a soul since she plays the cello. While writing the script, Aykroyd went through a few different titles, from Ghost Smashers to Ghost Chasers, to eventually settling on Ghostbusters. However, there was one major problem. Deep into shooting, it was realized that there had been a short-lived Saturday morning children's TV show in the mid-70s called The Ghostbusters, about a team of bumbling detectives, including a gorilla, who investigate ghostly occurrences. This posed a significant problem, as not only were there several signs in the movie bearing the name, but Reitman had just shot a scene with hundreds of extras shouting Ghostbusters over and over again. Unfortunately, the title was controlled by Universal, and they refused to allow Columbia, who was producing the film, to use it. As fate would have it, however, Frank Price, the president of Columbia and the one who greenlit the picture, wound up as head of Universal Pictures during the production, putting him in a position to let Columbia use the Ghostbusters title, of course for a significant fee. After the movie came out, Filmation, who produced the original 1970 show, would capitalize on the movie's success and produce a new cartoon based on their original series. This is why the official Ghostbusters cartoon was called The Real Ghostbusters, to avoid confusion with Filmation's original version. And even though Reitman and Ramis had scaled down the scope of Aykroyd's original script considerably, there was still a ton of visual effects work that needed to be done. And at the time, there was only one VFX house that was big enough enough to handle it all, ILM. Unfortunately, ILM had their hands full with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So Reitman took a page out of George Lucas's book and decided to create a visual effects company just for the movie. To run it, he'd hire VFX veteran Richard Edlund, who was planning to leave ILM anyway and start his own business. Reitman then convinced Columbia to join forces with MGM, who also needed an effects studio for 2010, the year we make contact, and advanced Edlund $5 million to establish his own company, which would become Boss Film Studios. However, the film's incredibly tight post-production schedule meant that many of the effect shots were rushed or done in one take, with both Edlund and Reitman feeling the end results were somewhat janky, but also feeling that they were part of the film's charm. Finally, there were also several deleted scenes and plot threads that were cut from the final edit of the film. For example, Egon and Janine's budding romance, Murray and Aykroyd playing a couple of homeless guys who would pop out throughout the movie like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and a sequence where Ray has a sexual encounter with a ghost, which would be salvaged and thrown into the mid-film montage instead. Ultimately, it's clear Ghostbusters, while originally the product of Dan Aykroyd's imagination, was a massive collaborative effort, with nearly everyone involved making significant contributions to shape the beloved film we cherish today. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content.